Previously on Traben's Tomes. Currently, my physical read is House of Leaves, and I'm honestly not sure how long that's going to take. So about 3 weeks then. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben. These are my tomes, and I've got some heckin' chonkers today. I decided let's read House of Leaves and a 700-page book at the same time, and that was not my best decision, but I finally got through it. Have several other books to talk about. I thought I would have very little to talk about. We are, of course, going to start off with House of Leaves. This was an absolutely wild ride. I can see why this book is so divisive. I would imagine that people either love this book or hate this book. I am on the love it camp. It is such a interesting and challenging piece. I think this one's going to get a full review. So what I'll say here is I think this book deserves 5 stars on the merit of like effort and art alone. The layers are so complicated, and it creates a narrative that is very difficult to parse, and I think that that's part of the fun for those who love this book. There's an online community dedicated to like deciphering parts of this book and pointing out seeming errors in it that might reveal further meaning, which I think is fun. It's like a treasure hunt. So if you're not familiar with this book, the general premise of what could arguably be called the story, character named Johnny Truant, who finds this document in this old man's apartment who is passed on that purports to talk about a series of videos called the Navison records that, according to Johnny, do not exist. The Navison records purport to tell the story of a man who has found extra-dimensional space within his house. So he finds this, initially he finds this closet between his room and his kid's room that wasn't there before, and then eventually he finds this door leading off of his living room into this super huge space that could not possibly exist there. But again, that doesn't really exist, even within the fiction of the book, according to Johnny Truant. That's not even a real thing. So it messes with your perception really bad. So he's going through this document that purports to be responding to and researching this documentary that is not real. There are several other complications to this story framing, but the thing that people are going to find challenging about this book, and the thing that's going to turn them off, is the footnotes and the way that it's written. So this is written as, again, a document found by another person. They're annotating it. There's lots of footnotes. Most of the footnotes are really irrelevant. I feel like they're just excuses for the author to come up with clever article titles, but some of them are important. There's a bunch of back matter here that it will reference periodically throughout the story, including things about Johnny Truant's life, art, This version I have is full color, and so it just has all these different things in the back. And the text at times will mimic what is going on in the book. So I'll give you an example. There's a point where someone is crawling through a narrowing passage, and the text on the page is getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just like a single line of text across the page. So there's a lot of playfulness here with form. There's a lot done with the footnotes. There's also a lot done with perspective. I found it absolutely intriguing, although very hard to get through. And there are parts of this book that I didn't read. I know. But listen, there are some of the footnotes here are just long lists of people's names or of items in a house. There are parts of the text here that are backwards. I had to read in a mirror. There are parts that, again, go up and down the page. Parts of the book are upside down. You're flipping the book all over the place. And I had a blast with it. It just took a while. 5 stars. All right, the other huge book that I decided to read alongside House of Leaves was Strange the Dreamer. Now, I did not know going into this that this was a part 1 of a series. I really liked this book. I loved the setting. I thought it was incredibly creative. This tells the story of Laszlo Strange, a librarian who is researching the city of Weep, which he knows had a different name at one point and then was magically forgotten by everybody in the world at the same time. And for some reason, because he was so attracted to it and so focused on it at the time when this happened, he knows that it's real, and he knows a lot of this mythology and these like creation myths out of his culture are in part real. They're based on real things, and so he's looking at books that people dismiss as fairy tales for children as evidence of this city he wants to get to. There's some very complicated relationships with people in his town. Eventually, he gets visited by a roving band of like researchers and different people with special skills that are being collected by people from the city of Weep to go back and solve some problem that they are facing. And they will not say what it is, other than to say that once they see the city, it will be very obvious. From there, it's his journey to this city, dealing with the issue, finding love. Like, it's not really romantic-y, but it's got that romance element to it. And I found it pretty nice overall. It was sweet. It did get a little saccharine toward the end, and it leads to a decision at the very end of this book that just made me very upset with it at the very last minute. But the world is just so creative. Everyone has 2 hearts. One pumps blood and one pumps spirit. And you can live without your second heart pumping, but you are kind of listless and you don't have like drive. And that was just such an interesting concept. And it's like it's brought up like so like nonchalantly, right? So just like the world is so creative, mythology is so rich. I thought the characters were interesting enough. There is quite a large cast here, but I think the book does a good job of highlighting the characters that you need to focus on and building the relationships that matter for the plot. And then like having the other characters there too, and they're also doing things, but it's not intrusive to where you have to like learn about every character's backstory. And I would definitely recommend this. I think this also got 5 stars, although like I said, the very end of the book irks me but it's not enough to undo all the cool things, all the cool concepts within this story. All right, the last book that I read for this month was Nicked. This is a book by M.T. Anderson. We had a loan on the library of an M.T. Anderson comic book, and it's my understanding that this is their first foray into like adult literature. Not like adult like risque, but like just, you know, adult fantasy versus like YA. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was slow moving. I thought the characters were paper thin. There's a romance in here too. Feels very performative. Feels very like out of nowhere. Doesn't really work for me. When I read this for a book club, and during the book club meeting, someone mentioned that it feels like the old like swashbuckling adventure movies, like Pirates of Penzance or something like that, which I guess is true. Like in a lot of in a lot of ways, this has that kind of like swashbuckling adventure. It's about a real life event, kind of like it's based on real life events where a group was going to retrieve the bones of Saint Nicholas to bring back to their city because they had a vision that that's where he was supposed to be. And this was a time where religious relics were very significant and would drastically alter the prosperity of your town or city. And so it is the group going to retrieve the bones and try to bring them back to the city. But it is a fantasy book. It takes some of these concepts of like early exploration, like there are dog-headed men in here. It feels like it's meant to be like a reverse Jailbreak or like go retrieve the MacGuffin adventure story. There is sword fighting here. There are a couple of what could have been cool set pieces, but all the prose is so dense. Everything moves so slowly. Every character has like 5 names because they have their rank, they have their first name, their last name, and it just interchanges them, and you have to learn who's who and what profession they have. And there's a whole cast of characters that we go into that I mostly didn't care about. Some of their backstory flashback things were fun, but it was just too much. And like I said, especially because this is meant to be like swashbuckling, high seas, adventure, go retrieve the relic, oh, things go wrong, let's have a big like fight. That feels like it should be snappy, feels like it should be like moving. This book dragged so hard at the beginning, and even when we got to the action sequences, the way they were described was so dull. I gave this 2 stars. It was, I think, the 5th book I've given 2 stars this year, so it has a rather dubious distinction of being one of the worst books I read so far this year. Did not care for it. Would not recommend. But that's just me. Maybe you think that's cool. And the history behind it is super interesting. Like I was reading the Wikipedia articles for like this actual endeavor and for the history of the bones of Saint Nicholas and the miracles that he supposedly performed, which show up in the book. And that was all really interesting. The dog-headed men, very cool. But that was more interesting than the book. So if you want to know about this, I'd say just like research it instead of reading the book, and you'll probably have a better time. I read through Radiant Black 6 and 7, which I think is a really big turning point for the series. So Volume 6 ends the Cataclysm War, which was a wild ride. It dealt with multiple universes dealing with the same problems, essentially, but in different ways, and having completely different results. And it was just really cool the way that it was written, because it would have a volume like volume 20 or issue 20, and then it would have issue 20.5, and it would be the same events or the same challenge they had to face from this extraterrestrial threat. but they would do it in completely different ways, and then it ended up with completely different results, and having to basically overlay two universes on top of each other felt very much like Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I think is entirely intentional. I believe this one is called Infinite Earths, is the title of the volume. So I think Higgins knows what he's doing when it comes to making these references and writing these stories that are evocative of older comic book arcs, while still giving you that tokusatsu vibe, that Super Sentai vibe. I recommended this for things you could read while Super Sentai is completely imploding. Volume 7, all new, all different. I think this one went down in ranking just a little bit because it is kind of that hard reset after you have one of these like major events in a comic where we're trying to find our footing again, like both in story and kind of story wise. We are trying to find our footing. We are trying to restart and find what is our conflict now. And I think, again, Higgins does a good job of melding that with what came before and making it to where the problems that are arising now are a direct result of what came before. But because Cataclysm War was such a high for this series, this feels much more mellow in tone, and the stakes don't feel as high. So going from one to the other, it kind of slumped a little bit. It wasn't as engaging as Volume 6. So I still would recommend Radiant Black. It's an amazing series. Even if you're not into like the tokusatsu stylings, this is also very evocative of just like really high quality superhero comics, and is paying homage to those stories without just outright aping them. There's like some really interesting storytelling going on here, and also the art still remains gorgeous, still remains amazing. I highly recommend it. One of my favorite comics. Go pick it up. I also read through the next 2 volumes of Rogue Sun, which was volumes 4 and 5. So volumes 4 and 5 of Rogue Sun. And this one is one that I feel is kind of meandering a little more. I feel like Radiant Black has a very clear direction of where it wants to go and how it wants to evolve. And this one is changing, evolving. It is developing the story and is trying to do something with this idea of family, this idea of responsibility. But I feel like in a lot of ways it moves through those motions very slowly. I do still love the vibe of this book, though. Like, I'm going to continue picking it up because it gives me those Buffy vibes. The main character here is fighting against like vampire werewolves and witches. This is like the supernatural line within the massive verse, and I really dig that. His powers are also fairly it's kind of a mix between like Ghost Rider maybe and like Green Lantern, in that he can like manifest different weapons, and I think that's a lot of fun. So still would recommend this. But again, I feel like there's less of a direction with this story. Although toward the end of this volume, we do get a hint, a sense of something bigger coming down the line, which I'm hoping will be explored, because they keep kind of teasing at this larger conflict and all these minor fights that he's getting into, like prepping him for that and kind of pushing back this inevitable fight against the big bad. But I'm hoping we get into that soon. So also would recommend Rogue Sun. It's a lot of fun. Not hitting quite as well as Radiant Black at the moment, but still a great read. I read through the Universal Monsters comics, Dracula and Creature from the Black Lagoon, and different vibes. Creature from the Black Lagoon is like a survivor story dealing with like trauma and loss and like facing your fears, going after those who harm you. It was fine, which is a shame because I really like the monster design in here. But the Dracula, the James Tynion Dracula, I really liked this. The art was amazing and the vibes were immaculate. But my concern with both is just the length. So these are one-shots, which is good because it means you don't have to invest in like an ongoing story. But at the same time, 6 issues is not a lot of space to really delve into character or, you know, establish like long-running themes. And I feel like in both cases, these feel like incomplete stories. Like they're trying to give us the meat of the story that they want to present. But in both cases, they felt kind of on the short side. I feel like I want to continue getting these because I think that the concept's very cool. And the stories are all written by different people, different artists, and I want to see how they reimagine the Universal monsters. Nostalgia for this type of character and storytelling is something that I really enjoyed about the books. And I think, like I said, of the two, I think Dracula hits the vibes better of the classic Dracula. And this one was trying to tell a story that just didn't work in the format, like in the 6-issue format that they had. So I'd still recommend, if you're a fan of the Universal monsters, of classic horror monsters, to pick these up. They're fun reimaginings, and they were engaging all the way through. Just like I said, a little bit on the short side for me. I would have liked to. I would like to have seen more. I read through Jonna and the Unpossible Monsters. Now, I had previously read the first 2 regular volumes of this. This is the Omnibus edition. So I had already gotten through the first 8 issues, and I posted a review on that when I was reading those a couple months back. And so I saw this in the store and decided to pick it up. Read through the whole thing again. So started fresh from the beginning. Read through all 12 issues, and I think it took me a grand total of 40 minutes. This is not a very dense comic as far as the dialogue goes. The art is a lot of fun. I think it does a really good job of catching the awe and power of these giant monsters. This is a young reader comic, so the story is pretty straightforward, but one that I still really enjoyed. We have a pair of sisters who are, so Rainbow and Jonna, and they are, Rainbow at the beginning is searching for her sister, looking for Jonna, and then when they meet up, they are looking for their father. And so it is the journey of them kind of going through this wasteland, because at one point in their past, like I want to say like a year ago, these vines started encroaching upon the land, and then these giant monsters appeared, and since then people have been having to deal with that as their new reality. And so it's their journey to find their father, to figure out what's going on, put things right. It was a lot of fun. I liked, again, I feel like the storytelling is very simple. This is not a book to read if you need like complex characterization, or you need like a big plot twist that you're not going to see coming. It's very by the numbers. It's very expected tropes and things like that. But if you want to see a tiny child kind of punch big monsters in the face, and do so in a way that is artistically very interesting, a very beautiful comic, I think it's a good choice, and I did enjoy my time with it. It's going to be something that's going to go on the kid comic shelf, and I hope that my daughter reads someday because it was a blast to read. Finally, I read through the Art of Extremity. This is the art book that is not listed on Goodreads for Daniel Warren Johnson's Extremity which is considered by a lot of people to be his like magnum opus, his big important piece. And this one was another really quick read. I think less than an hour to get through this one. I was trying to clear stuff off the cart. I really did enjoy reading Daniel Warren Johnson's notes. It was interesting to see how much trepidation he has. He's like one of my favorite comic book artists writing and drawing right now. And so to see him talk about how like he agonizes over these different choices and how he's always worried about his art was interesting. It's interesting to see that struggle. It was also really cool when there were several iterations of a piece of art. So in particular, he talks at length about hover bike design and how many iterations it had to go through, how many times he had to draw it. He talks about early designs and what was thrown out, and he talks at length at several points in this book about the overarching story that he was trying to go for. And particularly, I think it's volume 6, he said that they went back and forth, his editor and he went back and forth on it and trying to figure out how to make it the best story they could. And it's really cool to see that kind of behind the scenes information and to look at some gorgeous art, some cool sketches, to see all these different designs for things that ended up in the comic. Now, it's been a minute since I've read Extremity, so I think I would have gotten more out of this had I reread the comic and then read this, because then I would have, known what he was talking about with these character beats. I could recall most of what he was discussing, but I do think that this would be best as like an immediate follow-up to the book. I might do that sometime in the future, but it was still a lot of fun to look at, and it was interesting to see the thoughts behind the book and his entire purpose in writing it, which unsurprisingly is to do with the emotional resonance of telling an unexpected story, which I think Daniel Warren Johnson very good at. I think sometimes the depth of his storytelling and his the writing craft gets overshadowed by his very over the top kinetic art style. I need to do a artist spotlight on Daniel Warren Johnson, honestly. Oh, another thing that I found very funny in here is how he talked about how he has a difficulty drawing women, and this is something I've noticed from his art, is that a lot of the characters he draws look very samey, but it was interesting seeing him admit that and then thinking like, but you write so many comics with women as your protagonists, so I just thought that was funny. To hear him explain that and be cognizant of it. So this one would be one that I'd recommend only if you've read the book, obviously, and I would probably recommend doing it as an immediate follow-up to the book itself. And that's going to do it for me today. Down in the comments below, let me know what you are reading. Have you read anything that I looked at this last month? And if so, what were your thoughts? As always, please remember to like and subscribe. Help us grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.